flight, we are go for launch. T minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. This is Navigating AI, hosted by Rich Wilson, guiding business leaders through the new intelligence era. Let's explore how AI is reshaping business, leadership, and the world.
Welcome to Navigating AI, where we are guiding business leaders through the new intelligence era. Today's episode is titled From Psychology to People Strategy: How Steffi Thomas Came to Lead an HR Consulting Firm. She is the owner of Tulloch Consulting, a people operations firm serving organizations across Canada and the United States. Steffi started in psychology and moved into executive leadership as a hospital executive director, then led HR as a director before pivoting into consulting at Tulloch. She quickly moved from generalist to strategic partner, and as of this summer, officially took over the firm founded in 2016. Her work spans nonprofits, aviation, health, education, and more, all anchored on Tulloch's core values of communication, clarity, and consistency. Steffi joins us to talk about building strategic HR across industries and what it looks like to lead a modern people operations firm in an AI-driven world. Welcome to the show, Steffi. Great to have you with us and great to see you again.
Thank
So how have you been?
thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
I've been good. How have you been?
great. Thank you. Very grateful to have you here today. I'm going to go ahead and jump in because I have a lot of great questions for you today. You originally planned to go the medicine route, then pivoted into psychology, leadership, and eventually HR. When you look back, what were the big turning points that nudged you toward people operations and strategy rather than a clinical or purely corporate path?
Yeah, I get asked this question quite often, actually. So I always say I went from wanting to, let's say, diagnose medical symptoms to diagnosing organizational dysfunction. And it definitely turns out I'm much better at curing cultural problems than curing the common cold. Like you said, medicine was definitely the original plan. But somewhere along the way, I realized what I really cared about wasn't necessarily the science. It was the people behind the science. So psychology ended up giving me language for understanding, behavior, leadership, conflict, motivation, all the things workplace tend to struggle with quietly. And I think, if there's like one moment in time that I look back to as kind of a turning point, was during my early leadership roles. I kept finding myself drawn to culture, communication gaps, decision-making dynamics. I'd be in like a meeting and I'd be thinking to myself, this isn't necessarily, let's say, a performance issue. This is more of a systems and humans issue. And I think that was kind of the shift from clinical to organizational behavior and eventually into people strategy for me.
What's one way your psychology background shows up in your day-to-day conversations with leaders or, for that matter, employees?
Yeah, so I think honestly, it shows up quite often and it shows up constantly. And I think one of the things psychology taught me is to listen to the subtext in conversations. And I do this, in my daily life. I do it a lot in my professional life. It's to listen to things that are not being said. So, for instance, when a leader tells me, once again, the, age-old concern that they have, let's say a performance issue, I'm usually listening for, is it competence? Are they talking about expectations? Or is it more of just a human needs mismatch? And I think that lens kind of changes everything for me. I remember there was a time like earlier on when I just started consulting, and one of my clients, one of the managers, told me that one of their employees was lazy. And it turned out that that poor guy had been given 3 different managers. They had been given 4 different job descriptions, and absolutely zero clarity. So that wasn't necessarily laziness, it was more of a survival tactic, and the employee was just confused, right? So psychology definitely has helped me listen to the subtext in conversations.
You've been an executive director of a hospital, led HR as a
Mhm.
director, and now advise as a consultant. How did being inside the organization as an executive shape the way you now show up as an external HR partner?
That's a good question. So, honestly, being an executive director in a hospital means you become fluent in chaos. Like, honestly, I say that I have a PhD in chaos. You honestly go from like a budget crisis to a union issue to being front facing on a media call in the same hour. So, when you've sat in that chair, I realized that a lot of HR recommendations actually have ripple effects. So now when I give advice, it's not necessarily that HR is a silo or HR for HR's sake. It's more a business strategy with people at the center.
You came into Tulloch as a generalist, moved quickly into
Mhm.
strategic partner role, and as of I think it was this August, you officially took over the firm. You now own the firm.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I
So,
do.
what did that transformation from key team member to now owner look like for you professionally and also personally?
It's been a wild journey, I'll tell you that much, but I'm very, very thankful for it. I'm very thankful for the journey. But, I've had this question be asked to me a couple times from a lot of my clients that have been with me from day number 1. And this is the example I give them. I give them the example that taking over Tulloch was like going from being a really trusted co-pilot to suddenly flying the plane. So professionally, that meant stepping into vision, brand, systems, and financial decisions. And personally, let's just say there's nothing like being an owner to make you rethink your time management, your self belief, and honestly, your caffeine tolerance.
The firm's values are communication, clarity, and consistency. What's something you've kept exactly the same from Jana's leadership, and what's one thing you've made your own?
Yeah, great question. So it's pretty recent still since I just took over in the summer, so a few months, but yeah, so I think Jana built the firm on, communication, clarity, and consistency, like you mentioned. And
Hmm.
those values are definitely non negotiable. I kept them exactly as she designed them, and I really resonate with them. I think in the last couple months, what I've added is a more strategic AI driven layer. I think today we're not necessarily only solving people problems, but we partner with leaders at the executive table using data and AI to shape decisions in a way that's faster, smarter, and still like deeply human.
Okay. So you've mentioned to me that you work with 10-person nonprofits to much larger organizations. What's the typical moment or pain point that makes a leader say, we need outside HR help?
Okay, so there's a few moments, but I think one moment is no, like pretty much this is much bigger than we thought. It usually tends to be, let's say, a messy employee matter. It could be rapid growth. It could be compliance concerns. Or sometimes for some of our smaller business owners, it's simply the realization that honestly, the founder can't do HR off the side of their desk anymore.
Okay. So in the first say 30 to 60 days with a new client, what are the first 2 or 3 moves you make to stabilize things for them?
Okay. So I think, we often talk about risk and compliance across the organization in any sort of capacity. So I think the very first thing that is usually done is stabilizing the risk. So asking questions such as, are we compliant? Are we exposed? Once we have that foundation set, I think the next step is mapping the people system. So roles, any sort of gaps, culture, communication. And then third, I think it's very important when you're talking about the 30 to 60 days to have quick wins. So something small and visible that shows the team, okay, things are improving and, there's like the light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, the three things are, I think, stabilizing the risk, mapping the people system, and creating quick wins.
You've said you prefer people operations or people strategy over the term HR because of the baggage HR can carry. When you walk into a new client, what does it look like to move them from reactive, policy driven HR to genuine people strategy?
Yeah, and I think one thing when we look at this question is, I think sometimes we need to also understand the difference between the two, and I think it's kind of like a mindset shift in a way. So exactly to your point, traditional HR is very like reactive. Something went wrong, let's write a policy. People operations is proactive. We understand the system, we build the structure that prevents any sort of problems, and then we create an environment where people can actually succeed. The one common example that I give to a lot of my clients when I'm talking about, these two different aspects is a simple example that traditional HR is like putting out fires, and then people operations is like redesigning the whole building so it stops catching fire. And so when I engage a client, I'm often taking them from that mindset shift from HR is paperwork to HR is how we drive culture and performance.
Can you share an example of a client where a shift in people ops mindset changed an outcome, maybe around engagement, retention, or a tough employee relations situation?
Yeah. So I think I had a nonprofit client last year. They came to us with a few different concerns. And one of the main concerns they came to us with was high turnover as well as morale issues, which kind of go in tandem. So, and they went to several different consultants prior to coming to us. And so in the past, the consultants kind of threw policies and threw guidelines at the problem or the concern. So, kind of
Mm,
my take was, instead of throwing policies, I tried to understand what the source of the problem was. Kind of referring back to, like, how I use psychology, what was the underlying context in regards to all the concerns that were coming up? We found out that a lot of it was communication bound, and
mm.
roles and training. So, what we ended up doing is we ended up building communication rhythms. We ended up clarifying roles through job descriptions and accountability measures. And we trained managers on expectations. Within, I believe, the first, I think, 6 months, the retention stabilized, the engagement shot up. We did like a pulse survey to get an engagement score. And then the one great thing about this, or this success story, is all of this was done without a single new perk or any sort of monetary value like a raise. So it
Wow.
goes back to, genuinely, yeah, listening to the context and the crux, um, and solving the root problem.
So you have this wide mix of sectors: aviation, nonprofit, indigenous, health, education. But you've told me what happens with people inside the organizations is surprisingly similar. What are the universal people patterns you see again and again, no matter what industry you're dealing with?
Yeah. um, so I think what's intriguing is that humans are honestly remarkably consistent across industries. If you're talking about the professional piece, as well as just personally in the world, they are consistent. Whether it's aviation or nonprofit, what I found out is people usually want three things. Number
Okay.
one is clarity.
Hmm.
Number two is appreciation. And
Okay.
usually, number three is a manager who actually communicates. What I have found over, the last years being either in corporate or in consulting is that most dysfunctions usually come from missing one of these pieces.
What's interesting is 1 and 3 really go hand in hand. Clarity,
Yes.
communication. If you have a manager that can
Yes.
communicate, you'll have an employee that has clarity. So on the flip side,
100%.
on the
Completely agree.
yeah, where do industry nuances really matter? For example, how would you approach a nonprofit versus an aviation client? Since we're already talking about those two anyway.
Yeah. So I think even though there is consistency, I think where the nuances are in different industries is pretty much around risk and pace. So, what I mean by that is in aviation, you're dealing with
Yeah.
compliance, safety, and operational urgency.
Okay.
In nonprofit, it's more you're balancing mission, usually a lot of the times limited resources, and a lot of emotional labor. So, at the crux of it, the strategy is quite similar, but the pressure points look very different.
Okay. So you've described yourself as being very aware of AI and AI agents. And you told me that you're open to anything at the intersection of AI and HR. Right now, where are you most optimistic about AI actually helping HR and people teams do better work?
Yeah. So
For
AI is a very, very, very hot topic nowadays, I think, across all industries. And
every
I
day.
honestly, like to your point, every day in everything. I love AI. I love AI in HR. I love just AI, period. And the one context I think once again, like when I talk about mindset shift, I don't I think there's a fear around AI, right? So AI is not the scary, robots making decisions version or not the job replacer, but I
Right.
see AI as kind of like a clarity machine. So AI, like, I'll give an example of what we use AI for. It can help draft policies, analyze patterns, it can support onboarding, it can create different training paths. It literally takes the repetition work or the admin work off HR's plate so teams can actually focus on people, not paperwork. We use it a lot for policies. I
Yeah.
think sometimes individuals like to take AI to like an extreme, like, hey, AI can help approving terminations. There's absolutely no way AI can help approving terminations. Like no one wants, ChatGPT to say, after reviewing behavior patterns or something like that, we have collectively decided that you're not redundant. So once again, I think it's the administrative work, the patterns, the policy, but at the end of the day, you need the individual to be translating that into, implementation and actions.
Okay. So you have a client and they tell you, we want to start using AI in our HR department. What's one guardrail or one daily or weekly practice that you would recommend so that they stay ethical, compliant, and of course, human?
Yeah, so I do actually have a lot of clients right now having this conversation with me. And I think it kind of goes back to, the previous kind of statement that I made. I think the one guardrail that I often mention is that AI supports decisions, it
Hmm.
doesn't make decisions. So human oversight is non-negotiable. In regards to one practice that I usually implement with clients that are pro AI is a weekly AI hygiene check. So we review prompts, we check outputs, we, confirm the accuracy of the data that was inputted, and then we ensure there's equity and compliance as well. So yeah, so one practice would be a weekly, let's say, AI hygiene check.
So you're based in Canada. but you work with clients who have
Yes.
US employees in states like Virginia and New York. How does that cross
Yep.
border perspective influence the way you think about compliance, risk, and employee experience?
Yeah, so I think there is definitely a lot of you know, similarities, but I think there is definitely differences as well. Um, I think working across, let's say, Canada and the US, it gives me a very realistic view of risk. So the US can sometimes tend to be a little bit more, let's say, litigious, and then Canada is a bit more procedural, and both have their pros and cons and both have their quirks. I think understanding both sides as well as both systems um, help me build stronger, clearer processes that stand up in either environment. So it helps me develop more of, holistic frameworks.
Okay. Would you care to share an example where differences in regulations actually pushed you or a client toward a better practice, not just a more complex one?
Yeah, I honestly I'm just working with a client through this right now, and some of the
Yep.
stricter US, let's say, employment regulations has ended up me working with this client, pushing them towards kind of better, in plain English, paperwork and better practices. So, for example, tightening documentation or even something as honestly simple as redefining exempt versus non-exempt roles often leads to much more fairness and clarity overall in the organization.
For a business owner or HR leader listening or watching right now who knows they've outgrown lightweight HR, but really don't know where to
Right.
start, what would your 30-day playbook look like?
Okay. So 30-day playbook. So I think the very first thing is you always need to start with the foundation. So you
Okay.
need to audit your basics, audit the basics. So are your roles, are your policies, are you meeting compliance? Are you meeting regulation? I think that's the very first step. You're setting the foundation. I think the second piece would be fixing the bottlenecks. So, what slows people down every day? And then the third, I think, I'm someone who harps on communication a lot because I think it's very, very important. I think it's implementing communication rhythms. So, weekly one-on-ones, team huddles, quarterly meetings, however, whatever that communication style is for your organization, but implementing regular communication rhythms, I think is very important. And then I think within the first, you know, 30 to 69, 30 to 60 days, let's say, setting 90-day expectations is important to look to the future short term. So that can be for managers, for new hires, as well as for HR.
So if they could only track one or two metrics to see if it's working, which would you choose and why?
Yeah, so HR is full of metrics. And I think some of the most common ones everyone's probably heard of is, turnover rates, retention rates, employee engagement survey. I think the two ratings or metrics that I think actually are very important. Number one is time to clarity. So, how quickly can employees get answers? I always say speed to clarity is honestly speed to results.
Okay.
And second is manager consistency. So are expectations being delivered the same way across the organization or across the company? And I truly believe that if those two improve, everything else improves.
What's one mind shift you'd love HR and business leaders to walk away with from our conversation today?
Yeah, I think there is a concept that when you get called into the HR office, it's a negative connotation that comes with
It's
it,
like going to the
right?
principal.
I remember 100%. I remember when I used to work, honestly, Rich, for corporate, and we had a couple different retail locations, and I used to walk through this retail location. I used to be known as the angel of death because people were so worried that I was coming for something
No
negative.
way.
Exactly. And so I think like eliminating the negative connotation that comes around HR, I think is one thing. And second is HR isn't just about rules. I think if I want one thing that individuals should take away or leaders should take away, it's that honestly, HR is your support function. It's about helping people do great work with less friction and more clarity.
For the other HR professionals tuned into this episode, curious about how you grow your business. What marketing channels are working best for you right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think once again, I mean, Jana has set up the firm phenomenally, and I think a lot of our marketing channels that work best right now is honestly referrals and relationships. So I think they outperform everything. A lot of the clients that have worked with us or have worked with me have referred other clients to myself. So right now, my best marketing or our best marketing channel is referrals and relationships.
Okay. With that being said, how do you guide those referral conversations so the right type of clients end up finding you?
Yeah, so I think it's about honesty. Goes back to some of our core values. I think when someone refers me, I usually guide the conversation by being very honest about it. Honestly, I'd rather say no early on than say yes to the wrong engagement. So I think it goes back to honesty.
Okay. Now, for those business leaders that are tuned in today and they're thinking to themselves, we could really use Steffi's help. How would they reach out to you? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, honestly, if you're listening and you're thinking, Steffi might be who we need, the easiest way to reach me is through our website or connecting on LinkedIn. And usually, what we'll do is a quick discovery call, which tells us everything, and then we can kind of discuss next steps.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steffi. Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. You are a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you, Rich. It was my pleasure.
Mission accomplished. This is Navigating AI. Subscribe for more insights into how AI is transforming business, leadership, and the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay ahead.